Hey friends and book lovers, welcome. Today we have a new background, which is going to be my permanent background because this is my beautiful library slash bookcases that I have recently built because I recently moved somewhere new. So if you missed that video and you want to see me putting these up, putting in books, kind of going through the motions, I will link that video up above. It is a pretty short little vlog style video. I have more to do, more finishing touches to put, if you will, and I will be doing a bookcase tour or like a library tour once I put the finishing touches on my library slash bookcase. So that is TBD for the moment. So hope you enjoy the new background. But today I am discussing the 8 books that I read in the month of June. The month of June was the Olympic Games readathon over at the Shelf Space Discord, and I was like a assistant to Nick's goddess, who was Anya, on our team, and she was the team captain and I helped her out. Our team came in second to last place, which I was pretty okay with because we were last place for at least the first 2 weeks. So I wasn't too mad about that. The team that won was Abby Salter's team, that's Team Poseidon, which I think we're all happy about because nobody wanted Team Zeus to win, so that was really good. And it did push me to read 8 books during a really busy moving month, so that was incredible. I definitely took a break in the first couple weeks of July from reading just because June was so hectic and I was doing so much and reading so much, but overall pretty happy with what I got accomplished. So let's get right into talking about the books that I read. The first book was Elatsue by Darcy Little Badger. This is a, I believe, kind of own voices folklore fairy tale about a girl who can basically see like dead people and dead things. So Elatsue, who is our Lipan Apache protagonist, goes on a journey to figure out who killed her cousin. And honestly, it was good. For me, it was a younger reading age category than what it had been marketed as. This is supposed to be YA, but honestly, it read a little bit more middle grade to me. So if you want maybe a book that bridges middle grade and YA, this might be it because it does read a little younger than the YA that I'm used to reading. But I did love the imagery. I loved the style of writing. I felt like every time the other world or the dead or whatever like to that nature was described, it was done really well. I did find it a little hard to get into for the first like 30 or 40%, maybe like 30% of the book, but after that it started to pick up really quickly and it was just chapter after chapter of like trying to figure out who done it and having her friend along with her and seeing all these different ghosts and people and learning about her background, especially her background in like the magics and how her other family members have been involved in this type of magic, so that was really great. And I think I rated this one a 4 stars. Another one that I read in June, and I'm not going in order, is Deal with the Elf King by Elise Kova. This is one of those fantasy romance novels, and it is the first in a series that she's doing. I think it's called Married to Magic, but each book in that series is a standalone book. I think in the same world, but I'm not sure. But this was the first one. The second one's coming out, I think, in August or something like that. And this one is called Deal with the Elf King, and it is exactly what you want it to give you. I feel like there are a lot of stories like this. It's basically a Hades Persephone retelling once you get down to it, but it gives you exactly what you want it to give you. It's not overly smutty, but it is very intimate and cute, and it is enemies to lovers type of story, and it can be kind of heartwarming towards the end, so that was really nice. But again, it wasn't anything amazing or completely original in terms of fantasy romance. I think if you enjoy it and you want a light read, this is definitely an easy light read, and I use this one for the Aphrodite prompt. And oh, before I forget, Elatsue, the book that I just mentioned, I used for the Hades prompt since it had a lot of undead in it. But Deal with the Elf King, gorgeous cover. Elise Kova never fails to give us a beautiful, stunning cover, and so I used that for the Aphrodite prompt, and it was just a quick, easy, happy, romantic book to read, so I really enjoyed that one. The next 2 books I'm going to be talking about actually introduced me to an author that I am now a complete fan of, especially her audiobooks. I read both of these on audio, though I do have physical copies, and the first one is Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is a a book novel written in verse, and at first I wasn't sure how I would like a novel that was written in verse, but I read it on audio because I figured that would be more enjoyable to read a novel in verse on audio. And apparently Elisa Acevedo is like a poetry slam champion, and it shows. Her voice, her narration is just so passionate, it's so impactful, and I think it makes the book and the characters really come alive. And I fell in love with Poet X. I think it's like one of my favorites probably of the year. I am so late on this. I know everyone has already read it. I mean, it's a very quick read. I am so late on this, but it is so good. I think the narration just does it. I'm sure the physical reading of this is just as good, but I think the audiobook narration is what I would recommend if you're reading this book, to read the audiobook. And that comes from someone who is not a big audiobook reader. I've never done immersion reading. I don't typically audio read, but this is amazing and it should be read in audio, and it's just so freaking good. I highly recommend Poet X. It's got Latinx, it's LGBT, oh, it's so good. It's so good. This one is contemporary, though I usually read a lot of fantasy, but still 100% worth it, especially because I am trying to branch out into other genres that I might really enjoy. And this one, so good. The other book that I have from Elizabeth Acevedo, I think is one that is kind of on BookTube. I haven't heard too many people read it, but I have mostly heard good things from those that have read it on here and that I do know. And that is With the Fire on High. Obviously read this for the Demeter prompt because there is food all over this cover and it just fit so well with that. This is also a contemporary novel, but it's not written in verse. It's just written like a regular novel. And I was wondering how her narration would change because I read this on audio as well. I decided to check out what it would be like on audio. And honestly, still so good. Still the same impactful, passionate narration that Elizabeth Acevedo has. And honestly, from now on, I mean, I'll probably get a physical copy because they are just all so beautiful. Poet X, With the Fire on High, so gorgeous. But I'll probably be buying her books on audio first just because they're so, gosh, her just narration is so good. Like, why would you not want to have it on audio? And audio is a great option too if you want to read more. I'll go into the synopsis a little bit for this one. This is about a girl, a young woman in high school. She has a young baby and she lives with her grandma, and she's kind of struggling a little bit. You know, she's trying to make ends meet, trying to help pay bills. She's working, but she has this big passion for cooking and culinary, and there's a bit of magical realism in how she is attached to the food and how like she's able to mix things together, and it seems a little bit magical that way, but it's not really a fantasy type of story. And so we discover her going on this culinary journey and going through her struggles with her baby and her baby's father, and it's just very intimate. It's really beautiful. And even though it's like a 17-year-old girl, it's still relatable at parts because she does have a very mature journey ahead of her, and you just get to see her joys and her struggles, and you kind of just feel everything she's feeling. And that is just the power of the narration of Elizabeth Acevedo and her books. So highly recommend pretty much anything by her because it is stunning. Oh my gosh. And I will mention that Poet X, I keep forgetting, I read for the Apollo prompt because it was a book that's not written in the traditional format. It's written in verse, and that fits in super well with the Apollo prompt. The next book I read for the Artemis prompt, which is to have either the word moon or night in the title, or to have the moon or the night in the cover of the book. And so for this one, I read another middle grade, and that was Amari and the Night Brothers. It was one of the only books that I could think of that had night in the title, and I felt like I could read it and get through it in the readathon. It's not super short. It's about 300 or 400 pages, and though it is middle grade, it's still, you know, it took a bit of time to read. It took a normal amount of time to read than other middle grades that I find are a lot faster. This one I read half on audio, and then that one was just spontaneously returned to my library, and then I couldn't take it out again, and half physically. So on audio, it was actually really well done, and you got really immersed into it. It almost felt like you were watching a cartoon movie or that you were listening to a fairy tale. This is about a girl whose brother goes missing, and she ends up discovering via kind of like a lottery ticket to this magical school that she has these crazy magical powers, and she tries to go on a quest to find her brother because he is missing. So that's the story of this. It does get a little dark at parts, and it does talk about a few societal issues that people of color have to deal with, and so I think that's really well done in a middle grade novel. I think it doesn't gloss over those things. It makes the character deal with it, and I think and truly believe that a child who's of color reading this book could really relate to it. So I feel like it's really beautiful, it's really well done, and I know that other booktubers who have read it, and they are booktubers of color, have really related and loved this novel and just kind of wished they had it when they were younger. And so I hope that people really do give this a chance because it is really well done. It's a beautiful middle grade. I kind of recommend it to like any child who loves to read fantasy should read this. It's so good and it's so easy, and there's a lot of twists in it and you don't really know what's gonna happen. I was taken by surprise a couple times for sure, and just really good. I think I gave this one overall like a 4 or 5 stars. It was really impeccably done, and I can't wait to see where Phoebe Alston goes with this series. So I'll definitely be reading the next ones in this series. So the next one I read was for the Hera prompt, and that's to read a book that has like a matriarchy or a queendom in it. And for this one I ended up rereading Monstrous by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda, who one is the author and one is the illustrator. This is actually just really beautifully done. One of my favorite graphic novel illustrations. I feel like the illustrator for this is just, oh, chef's kiss. She's just so good. The story does have strong female characters and like a strong queendom, goddesses, matriarchy, so I felt like this really fit the Hera prompt. This one is considered a like steampunk fantasy novel. It's pretty gory. It's definitely quite adult because it does have a lot of gore and body parts in it, but it's really interesting in the fact that there's like, it seems like there's 2 factions, like the old gods and the new gods, and it's a very complex story. It's very difficult for me to explain this story, so I just encourage you to read it if you're interested in something kind of dark, beautifully written, and also beautifully illustrated, and kind of steampunky as well. We have this main character who has basically like a monster living inside of it, and so she's called like Monstrous is about her. And so we discover what that is, what that means for her and for the people around her in this manga. I haven't read the next volumes. I've only read the first one, and honestly, it was a little more clear upon reread what the storyline was about because it is complex. And I feel like the first one, it does world build to the point where it'll take you to these pages where you have a kind of cat or like cat-like creatures that are very intelligent, explaining things to you about what's happening in the story and the history of it. So there is a lot of world building. I'm intrigued to see if there's just as much world building in the next few novels or mangas, but this one is really good and definitely recommend it. I can't wait to get to the next few because it really needs to happen. All right, so the next one that I read was actually an ARC that I got, and I got this like last minute in June. I think a few of us did, and I wanted to post a review on it and give it a really good review. So I did a video review on this, which I will link, and that is the Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. Now this is my first Tasha Suri novel, but I know she has a duology, a fantasy romance duology that a lot of folks have read and loved. I haven't read that one yet, but it starts with Empire of Sand, and I do want to get to that. But this is her first in a new trilogy that she's doing. It's called the Jasmine Throne. I think it's called the Burning Kingdom trilogy, and basically it's about a princess who is imprisoned because she's being punished, and a maidservant who is supposed to be her maidservant, who both possess forbidden magic, and kind of them coming together trying to better the society because the ruler of this kingdom, who is the princess's brother, is quite cruel and evil and very much against any type of magic or magic-like faith that they have and that they possess. So I will link the review for that up above so that you guys can check it out if you're interested. That has a way more in-depth spoiler-free review if you feel like you're not really sure if you should read it or not. I think just quickly, it was a little slow for me for the first 40%, so it took me a little bit longer to get through, but for the rest of the book I was hooked. It was super good. I liked the romance, I liked the writing style, I liked the imagery, but yeah, the slowness was really tough for me. And this one I read for EOS, which is like the first in a series, so that was really handy. And the last one I read is actually reading the last book in a series, which is the Nyx prompt, so that's my team's prompt, and I read The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty and loved it. Gave this absolute 5 stars. It was so good. Probably my favorite book in the trilogy, if I'm honest. I know that this is the July read for Books with V's Discord. I read it a little early because I wanted to read something thick and chunky to get all the points that I could for our prompt, because we were able to double the points if you read a book that was part of your team's name, team's prompt. So I read this one, and honestly, truly, so good. I can't wait to discuss it on her live show. I think that's going to be the beginning of August at some point. So if you don't follow Books with V, you definitely should, and you should definitely read this book. I know so many of BookTube have really loved this and read it. It's considered like a fantasy, but also there's a lot of fantasy romance elements, and I really loved the way that this whole book went down. I wanted to know what happens, but I also just would love more books in this world. I fall in love with the characters, I fall in love with the world, and it's so good. I might do like a trilogy review on this trilogy because I just really do love it, and it's so good. I even like the way that it ended. I was pretty satisfied with the ending. I know a lot of people aren't, but I actually really enjoyed the ending, so it was really good. If you've read this trilogy and we haven't talked about it, let me know what you think, because I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. So those are the 8 books that I read in the month of June. If you've read any of these books, or if you want to read any of these books, please leave your thoughts down below in the comments. I always love reading them. And if you like this video, please click the like button. That really does help me out a lot. And if you like my content and you want to see more, please click the subscribe button.